of a tradition here at Startup Grind. And so when I announce our very special guest, I need everybody to stand up and cheer like the Bears just won the Super Bowl. Yes. Anyway, all right. On the count of three here, everybody, let's get up on our feet, scream and yell and cheer. Let's give it up for Logan! I'm sorry, I had to start out that way.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
But we're all still celebrating. And sorry to, I guess, break in the new stadium too. Hurts.
Yeah, I have no comment.
So, how we'd like to start out, and this is really all about you, is why don't you tell us where you're from, where you grew up, and what kinds of things were you doing when you were a kid, and maybe share with us some story that relates to sort of your entrepreneurial spirit.
Oh, entrepreneurial spirit as a kid. Obviously from the jabs I think that you're taking, I am Northern California, East Bay native, San Francisco 49ers fan, struggling quite a bit over the course of the last 24, 48 hours. I appreciate you bringing that up. So yeah, I grew up outside of the Bay Area, outside of San Francisco, a town called Danville, East Bay. Grew up not an entrepreneurial family. I feel like the kind of the childhood entrepreneurial story, you're supposed to have your mom or dad started some company and instilled this spirit in you early on, and I don't have that. My mom's a teacher. My dad sells auto parts. Not necessarily an entrepreneurial family at all. I think I don't have the lemon stand story as a kid. Not that traditional path. As I think back on it now, yes, entrepreneurial as a kid. I was probably more of what you consider a troublemaker than a real go-getter entrepreneur. This is bad. This is a bad start. I'm gonna set a precedent here. It's a bad start, but I think the first business that I was running was in 5th grade. I remember my next door neighbor, kid in my grade, his dad had a vintage collection of Playboys, every Playboy from the 60s on. And I struck a deal with the kid that I tore out all the centerfolds from each one, just the centerfolds from each one, and I sold those to the kids for $2 a piece. Just the centerfolds, so he didn't know anything was missing. But I think that was my first business.
That's brilliant. I think that's the best story.
There's that. So that's out there now.
Mary, did you get that? Share that, Twitter, everything? Where are we going from here? So,
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know how do we
that
follow,
ends that
how do we
conversation.
Follow
well, so I guess how more entrepreneurial. After that, had a lot of little side businesses, what I would probably consider hustles more than entrepreneurial ventures. And I actually I wasn't the traditional straight A student. I skipped class a lot, got in a lot of trouble, those sorts of things. And I think it was actually probably around my senior year of high school. I took an elective class that I thought was just kind of a cakewalk, and it was in the class we had one of those mock portfolios where you invest in technology or in stocks.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided to put all my investments. This is late '90s. I put all my investments in tech stocks, things like Yahoo and others, and I won the mock portfolio. I made $225,000 of fake money.
Wow.
Right? It was nice. And for some reason or another during that process, I got very into following all the technology companies that I was investing in. And this is late '90s. I lived in the Bay Area, so I was following all these companies that were 1998, 1999. We're just going through this explosive growth. And there was something about it that really resonated with me. And I actually think that that like maybe, I don't know if it was necessarily like that aha moment. You know, I can't like think back to a moment, but I think it was that sort of turned my perspective and probably like my path in life. It got me very passionate about entrepreneurship. I started going from like dropping classes and cutting school to taking entrepreneurship classes at like local community colleges and volunteering with startups. And, so it got me decided to major in entrepreneurship. And, no offense to anyone that is an entrepreneurship major, it's kind of a bullshit major. I didn't know that at the time, but, I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. So that's what I went to major in. I didn't, have a mentor that said like, you want to be an entrepreneur, like go to computer science. Like,
right.
A lot smarter to do now. But, so that got me very passionate about what I was doing, and that led to translated into college, where I was much more passionate about the work and about everything, just in terms of education, because I was so passionate about this space. So in college, I was majoring in entrepreneurship. I volunteered with startups all through college, local ones, through school, small things, and graduated with an entrepreneurship degree and started my first startup, 2 days out of school.
Really? What was the first startup?
Well, so first one out of college.
Yeah.
First one out of college. So I graduated, and I planned on going traveling after college, and I was going to travel for about 3 months, and I had some friends that I was going to do it with, and I just didn't, like, as it came up, I was like, oh shit, I don't have any money. So that plan sort of fell apart, and I said, okay, now I need to get a job. Like, I wasn't the guy going to job fairs and shit, because I didn't want to work at Ernst & Young. And so I actually was looking on Craigslist, which, again, this is like a long time ago now, so it's like, like looking for a job on Craigslist now is kind of like, who the fuck is this guy? Like, he's serious? I probably had like a Yahoo email address looking for jobs on Craigslist. All these things that I like wouldn't hire today. And I found this startup in San Francisco. It was very early stage at the time. The company was called Pay by Touch. We did biometric payment systems. Yeah. Basically pay with your fingerprint. So anyone that's been in Chicago for a long time, you probably remember like 6, 7, 8 years ago, like Jewel Osco, like there was these little terminals you could pay with your fingerprint. That was us. So I joined that company, employee like 20 or so in San Francisco. I was the most junior employee in the company. On Monday I started. On Wednesday I was living in Virginia, and I lived on the road for about 2 years, launching our product in all of the grocery stores. So like, I had the glamour job of literally standing in the back of grocery stores for about 2 years with a kiosk. Like, we were always positioned like right between produce and like the meat department. and I would try and stop people with their produce and get them to give me their driver's license, a personal check, and 10 scans of their fingerprints in Virginia in 2005.
Sounds like that went really well.
Yeah, that was easy. Yeah. Well, yeah, it went well for a while. The company raised $350 million in 3 years.
What happened to that whole?
Yeah, it's very well documented. Front page of the New York Times. I think the headline in the newspapers after we crashed, the padlocks on the doors. The headline was how a visionary raised and lost a fortune, and it was actually our CEO's mugshot. So,
wow.
It didn't go so well. Don't do cocaine, right?
Step one.
But it's funny because that first startup, raised so much money, and as a 22, 23-year-old, 24-year-old, like, I was seeing these things, and it was like, I got caught up in the hype. It was like. Yeah. Oh my God, we're blowing up, we're huge, we've got this beautiful office, and we have a gym on every floor, and like, they deliver apples to me every day. It's, all this shit was amazing. I was traveling, but I had these beautiful corporate apartment, 23, and I'm in like a $3,000 a month apartment. It was like, I'm living the dream. And, started to realize that we couldn't afford it. We weren't making any money. And so, what's funny is I left that company right before the crash. I saw a lot of these problems and recognized that it was going to be a bad thing. I think it was the first of the early employees to leave. People thought I was crazy at the time, but when I left, I joined Redbox as an early employee, and I'm sure we'll probably talk about that. But it was obviously a big success. And to be honest, I think I learned more in the couple years at Pay by Touch, even though I was by myself traveling the country and doing ridiculous shit in the path to failure. I think you learn more from failure maybe than you do from successes. So although it was, I think well documented as one of the top failures of all time, I look back very fondly at that experience. And it wasn't my money, so.
Even better yet. So let's talk about Redbox.
Okay.
I mean, it's an interesting story in its inception. And tell us a little bit about Redbox. I don't know if everybody's familiar with Redbox. You probably are. There's some amazing stat, like 1 out of 3 people have at some point inserted their credit card in a Redbox or something like that.
Yeah.
But I mean, tell us about that. So the history of it's interesting, where it came from, what you were doing for them, and.
Yeah, sure. So, like for me, I think how I found Redbox was even relatively interesting. I mean, I was traveling the country trying to put these fingerprint payment systems into grocery stores, and that meant traveling to a lot of sort of remote places. I was stationed in Chicago for a long time. That's how I ended up here, and it's how I ended up staying here. But this took me from Virginia to Atlanta to Mason City, Iowa, to Fargo, to Fort Wayne, Indiana. And it was actually in Fort Wayne, Indiana, we had a team that we were hiring to do promoting and sign customers up for Pay by Touch. And I had sent them down to live. I was managing them now, and I had sent them down to live in Mason or in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And the guys that were living there, they're from Chicago. They were sitting in Fort Wayne. It's like, what the fuck are we going to do in Fort Wayne, Indiana? There's nothing to do. Yes. Well, that sucks.
That's why you're here.
So they actually, I came down one time, and one of the guys had this case of this DVD, and I said, "What is that?" And he took me into the grocery store the next day, and there's this kiosk there renting movies. He had nothing else to do; he was renting movies. So I had this idea that we could potentially give away movie rentals in exchange for getting people to sign up for Pay by Touch. Right, both in grocery stores, some level of cross promotion. So I started researching Redbox to see if there was an opportunity for me to get some level of cross promotion. And I went to the website. I saw their branding. I saw some of the early copy and other things. And I kind of fell in love with the concept, with the idea of the company. So when I saw Pay by Touch start to go down, and I knew I wanted to be in Chicago because I lived there and met a girl far prettier and better looking, better, smarter, everything than me. I knew I wanted to be back in Chicago. This was an early stage startup that I thought had potential. So I looked at the website to see if there was a job that I could apply for, and the only job that I had any potential qualifications for was the marketing coordinator. Again, at the time, it was the most junior job available in the company, but. They were looking for someone that could do marketing to get people to, rent movies in a grocery store. I'd spent the last 2 years getting people to get fingerprints in grocery stores. So I made a solid pitch, I guess. Fortunately for me, when I started, Redbox was really in one city. It was very small. And my desk was fortunately pretty strategically positioned right in between our CEO and our COO's office. So I think there I started as marketing coordinator and started building things like promo codes. If you ever gotten a free movie from Redbox, those are things we worked on. Email marketing lists, all those things. But I just so happened to be the guy that was typically there latest at night. So when they would come out of their office to leave, or they'd come out and have an idea, I would always put my hand up and say I'll work on that. So I eventually helped them start a strategy and analytics team, and then we started a new business team, and I was able to position my role as the company got bigger away from a siloed department to what you consider an entrepreneurship group. So my job at Redbox ended up evolving to starting anything new. I was trying to stay entrepreneurial within the company.
There was this sort of incubator of sorts within Redbox, wasn't there? Something like that?
Well, we had a new business team.
Yeah.
So that was, that was us. But Redbox. So most people don't know, Redbox did start out of McDonald's Ventures.
Mm-hmm.
So Redbox was a concept from a McDonald's Ventures team. The same team that came up with things like drive-through and kiddie playlands and all sorts of other things. It started out actually as McDonald's trying to do vending machines that would sell anything: toilet paper, deodorant, toothpaste, and the only SKU that was making money was movie rentals. So they ended up, pushing down the kiosk, trying just movie rentals, and they spun it out from there. We spun the company out from McDonald's, so it was independent, but we tried a lot of new things. When I started, new business for us at the time was just things like putting 2 kiosks in one location, or doing video game rentals, or Blu-ray rentals, or raising prices, like those sorts of things. It eventually, we evolved to retail kiosks, like selling movies, selling games, to other kiosk businesses like, cutting keys or buying used cell phones, those sorts of things. And a lot of that came later. Redbox ended up being acquired by Coinstar, fucking nightmare, company nightmare. But it ended up being acquired by Coinstar, and so I think later on, the incubator that you're probably talking about, later on they tried like a lot of new kiosk concepts. Mm-hmm. I think the business started to evolve to think that they were an automated retail company, not an entertainment company. Yeah. And so that's when I kind of decided I was going to move on.
Were you, just quickly on Coinstar, were you a part of that? Part of that sort of transaction, or you said it's
No, I was
yeah.
down the list of people that would have been involved in that.
Got it.
No, I was, and certainly would not have been an advocate.
So what year are we talking about?
So with the acquisition, I don't know. I guess I started at Redbox in 2007, I think, maybe 2006, but I think 2007. The acquisition was probably somewhere around 2009.
Got it. And then from there, where did you go?
So Redbox had become fairly large at that point, and at that point it was also under Coinstar was a publicly traded company. So once I hit the 4-year mark, which I think is kind of a milestone when you're talking about like a company that's gone public, I knew that I wanted to start. So I knew that I wanted to start my own company. It's funny though, because as an entrepreneurship major, I always knew I wanted to start my own company, but I think when I graduated, like I said, I didn't have like those entrepreneurial mentors. Like I didn't have people giving me that level of advice of like, how to become an entrepreneur. So I think even coming out of school as an entrepreneurship major, I think early on, I didn't really know what it took to start a company. I didn't know how to go about it. I didn't know like how to take that step. And so, early on, it was always for me, like people always ask, like, what do you want to do? And I always said, like, I'm going to start my own company. I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I'm going to start my own company. And up until that point, it always just been joining companies as an early employee. And people, whenever you say like I'm going to start my own company, people always say like, well, what's it going to be? And it was always, for me, the answer was always something like, well, when I have that idea, I'll know, or like, I don't have the idea yet. Like, I think I in some way, like the idea meant more to me. Like, I thought like it was going to be this moment where I slipped and hit my head and it was like a fucking flux capacitor, like I just wouldn't know, and then I would go do it. And I learned over time that the idea was not nearly as meaningful as just the action of starting and the execution. And so when I decided I was going to start my own company and leave Redbox, my boss at the time was very supportive. He's a phenomenal mentor in the Chicago tech community, a guy named Mark Ackler.
Love Mark, by the way. He's my mentor as well.
Yeah, so he was my boss at Redbox, and we worked through kind of the plan, and he started to actually introduce me to local VCs and others. So I started meeting with VCs, I think, before I was even ready, pitching them on concepts, on ideas, like this is what I'm working on. And I actually remember the first pitch that I went to do. Mark introduced me to one of his best friends, a guy named Troy Heinekoff, who runs Techstars and is now a very prominent guy in Chicago tech. And I didn't know that as much at the time. And Mark set me up to meet with him. We went to Big Star, and I met him there outside, and he said, "Okay, kid, what do you got?" And I pitched him on this business, and it was very close to Belly, but it was a slight variation. It was local businesses could give rewards, custom rewards, within mobile apps. Like it was more like try mobile games, trial of mobile games, and as you hit achievements and accomplishments, you could get rewards from local businesses. That was the original concept. And Troy said to me, I don't get it. That was his first response. I said, well, obviously you're stupid. But he said, okay, we'll sell, see if you can sell a business. And he said, I know the owner of City Souls, which is like right around the corner there. And he said, let's go pitch him. And I said, oh shit. So we got up and literally walked over across the street to City Souls. And his friend was the owner. And he said, hey, I don't recall his name now. He said, hey, this guy's going to pitch you his startup. And I'd never pitched him. I mean, literally, this is the first time I was even talking about it. And I pitched him, and it did not go so well. And so I got a lot of feedback from him, and he was very generous with his time. I was able to spend some time with him and sort of iterate on the concept. So I started to evolve my pitch, and I ended up meeting with a lot of local entrepreneurs, going to a lot of these kinds of events. Actually, one of I think the pivotal moments for me, actually, in terms of like how I got started was at a tech cocktail event in Chicago. It was at Barleycorn in Lincoln Park. Yeah. I ended up going to that event, and there was a lot of people that I'd been pitching and connecting with, and they said, hey, you should meet these guys that work at this VC firm, and we ended up having a lot of drinks together. And the next week, I got this meeting at Lightbank, the venture firm in Chicago, actually through Twitter. Harper Reid, who's the CTO for Obama campaign and was, at Threadless and some others, he tweeted something about me and that I was starting something, and Paul Lee, who's a partner at Lightbank, responded and said, come in to meet. And I went in to meet with him, and I was sitting in a conference room with Paul Lee about to pitch him, and the analysts from Lightbank, they came in and they're like, hey, we got drunk with you last week. So I think they were like, this guy's cool, which I'm not. And so I pitched Paul, and it actually went better that time. He asked me to come back the next day to meet with Brad Keywell and Eric Lefkowski, who started Lightbank, the venture firm in Chicago, two of the three co-founders of Groupon. And so I went back the next day, obviously that night, really iterating my pitch and feeling very confident now that I had like my idea. I was solid, and I went into the pitch the next day. And it was Brad Keywell and Eric Lefkowski, and I'd never met them before, and they were obviously very wealthy and very successful, and I was very intimidated. They both sat down at the table. And Brad Keywell, he leans across the table. He's got like a shaved head. It's very shiny. He doesn't blink at all, ever. And he stares at me and he just says, "What do you got?" And I start to pitch, and Eric is just sort of walking around like he's going to leave at any moment. And he said, "Yeah, that sucks. We hate it." Okay, shit. And but then he said, well, this is what we're working on. And he started giving me some of the ideas for businesses that they thought were good ideas, ideas that they wanted to invest in but hadn't been pitched. And there I am, like Eric Lefkowski's pitching me this business idea, and I told him it sucked. And so I think we developed like a mutual admiration for telling each other our ideas were shitty. And I don't think many people told them that often. Yeah. So after I said that, he said, when can you start? And so I quit Redbox the next day, started as a founder in residence at Lightbank, and ended up spending about 3 months at Lightbank, and then launched Belly out of there.
So that's incredible, by the way. That's how it always happens. So the concept of Belly, though, was it what you brought to them, or was it something they had pitched to you, or a hybrid of the two? Or
again, it's funny. I think everyone wants the person sitting in this chair to have like the same story, right? Where it's like, again, I had a lemonade stand by the time I was 4, and I raised chickens, and I woke up at 4 a.m. and then I had this amazing idea, and I had this inspiration, and I was traveling in Africa, and it hit me like, it's like everyone wants like that same fucking storyline, and no, that's not how it happened. When I went in to pitch my idea, it was like custom rewards at local businesses, and they pitched me on an idea that they had to try to help businesses collect email addresses. It was just to collect email addresses, and it was very bad. But so ultimately, like the premise that we came to was, the problem that we wanted to solve was the same.
Yeah.
The end goal was the same, was to help local businesses get more customers by connecting with them digitally. And I think then it was, that's the premise. The problem that we want to solve is, how do we take the in-store experience in retail businesses and local businesses, how do we take that experience and bring that more online? How do we help these local businesses connect with local customers, have communication tools, and give them rewards or incentives to come in more often by communicating their personality, their culture, their business objectives, by giving them different unique rewards. And so we had a premise, but what we didn't know was execution. And I think realistically, like, Belly was not like, we're not like a revolutionary concept. I don't know if everyone here knows what we do. I mean, we create loyalty programs for retail businesses, and it's not like this revolutionary concept. It's not like anyone's like, oh man, they fucking invented loyalty programs. I mean, we didn't. When I started the company, there was 30 competitors live at the time, so it wasn't like this was a brand new idea. It's just all of them were failing, and everyone that had tried it was failing. And so we knew the premise was rock solid. Like, we knew that there was a business there. It came down to execution. And again, it wasn't about the idea. It was about the execution. And so for us, like, we knew the problem we wanted to solve. We just didn't know how to execute it. And so we spent a lot of time thinking through, like, problems like, do we integrate with point of sale systems? Is this mobile only? What have people done? What are they failing at today? And went through all those different iterations, and ultimately, like, for me, we had the premise that I put into a pitch, but my first 3 months at Lightbank is actually very close. They tell me now that they planned on firing me. Lightbank planned on firing me, yeah, because, like, for the first 3 months, I didn't really come into the office. As soon as I got the job, I just started going out to sell. So instead of going in and just meeting with them and talking about different ideas and whiteboarding, like, I would just go into local businesses and sell. And so the idea evolved over time. I mean, the first pitch that I made didn't work. So I left that business and changed things. At first it was like I had like a 14-page, PowerPoint presentation that I was taking into small businesses. That's not going to work. So I, scaled that down to like, a one-page PDF. That wasn't working, and so I tweaked some of the copy, I tweaked the messaging, I added different things, I tried different pitches. And ultimately, as I started to refine that just based on rejection. And so we had a couple of different concepts that we were trying, and a couple of different angles that we thought would be unique. And ultimately, we started building the iPad app, the customer-facing iPad at the point of sale. And the customer-facing iPad at point of sale enabled us to do a lot of things that the other models didn't. It allowed us to have, what we called 100% addressable audience. So people that weren't using smartphones or didn't want to download apps, they could use a physical loyalty card. So every customer could sign up. It enabled us to do things that like mobile-only apps, like check-in apps, didn't do, which was give the merchant and the business owner confidence that the person was actually there making a transaction. It enabled us to have a significantly better customer acquisition model. Right, because it's very difficult to get people to download an app while they're sitting at a cupcake shop or holding a coffee. And so, this was a concept that we decided we wanted to try. So ultimately, we built the iPad app, and the day it was approved in the App Store, when it was approved, I went out to sell and found a comic book shop in Andersonville called Alley Cat Comics. Pitched them, sold them, and they said, yeah, we'll give it a try. So I went and bought an iPad. Didn't have one. I went to the Apple Store, bought an iPad. Went to Home Depot, bought a lock, bought some glue because I didn't know how to lock a lock to an iPad, so we just glued a lock to the back of the iPad, which was really a scene. Like sitting in front of the store, like, oh yeah, no, we're good. Like, we're a professional company, waiting for the glue to dry. And we put the iPad in the store. We put it in on Friday night, right around 4 or 5 o'clock. I know because it was my wife's birthday. And so, around 5 o'clock, we started to just sit back and watch. And that night, as we watched, 17 of the 20 customers that came into the comic book shop, they ended up signing up for Belly. And wow. So we just stood back and we're just watching. And at one point, 2 girls came in, and this was kind of one of those aha moments. 2 girls came in, and one of them was buying a comic book, and the other one wasn't. And the girl who bought the comic books, she actually signed up for Belly, and she told her friend, she said, look at this, like if I come back here, I can punch the owner in the stomach. And that was a reward that we had created in the business. I think it's now probably one of our most famous rewards. Where you go into this comic book shop, if you go in, I think it's 50 times, so you can punch the owner in the stomach. And she read it, and she told her friend, like, holy shit, I can punch the owner in the stomach. So her friend was like, that's cool. She walked back into the store, picked up a comic book, and went and bought it just so she could sign up. And that was when we were like, okay, we're onto something.
Yeah, that's incredible. What a great story. So at that point in time, who else was on your team? Was it who built this thing at that point? I mean, did you get folks within LightBank, or did you go out and recruit folks, or?
Yeah. So as a founder in residence, like it was an interesting situation because I had some available resources, but I was not funded yet. So they were, I got a computer and all those things, but I didn't have any funding. So, my recruiting was, hey, come help me with this thing that we're co-founding and starting, but, I can't pay you yet.
Right.
So very early on, I met a guy named Craig Olliott. So Craig started a company called Where I've Been, and Where I've Been was an investment of LightBank, so they were in the LightBank portfolio. But he had sold the company to TripAdvisor. Mm-hmm. And he is certainly not what you consider a big company kind of guy. So he was working at TripAdvisor from 9 to 5 per his acquisition deal. But from 5 to midnight, 2 a.m., we would work on product. So he was, writing code. And so Craig, wrote all of our first lines of code. We had our first app was started to be developed actually by a junior in high school. Eric Lefkowski's money manager had a son who was a whiz kid in high school, and a whiz kid iOS developer named Jonah Grant. So Jonah started to work with us on building our iOS app. Jonah has since graduated, and he's now works for Dick Costello at Twitter. So wow, actually is kind of a whiz kid. And then we ended up hiring. First full-time team member was Chris Ingebrigtsen. He was iOS developer that was from TapMe Games, which was one of the first TechStars classes in Chicago, and hired our first sales guy, a guy named Alex Kruger, who was working at another LightBank portfolio company, and I kind of took him.
Did it at that point? What were you doing? Were you focused on sales, product, or both?
The role obviously always evolves, but I mean, early on, our CTO Craig, who was writing all the original code, he had a full-time job. So, during the day, I was speccing all wireframes, drawing all wireframes, designing product, how the product should work, what the concept is. And doing a lot of that at night while he wrote the code. But a lot of times during the day, I was selling, iterating, changing the pitch, creating the materials, creating the pitch. And so, early on, I was very much selling. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs that I meet with today, I think unfortunately spend far, far, far too much time in the office, behind a computer, behind a screen. I go to these co-working spaces, no offense to this place, no offense to 1871, but there's just far too many fucking people there. I unless they're making phone calls, I don't know what all those people are doing without customers. I don't really understand what people are doing behind their screen all day unless they're writing code. So I wasn't writing code, so I was selling. After hours, after 5 or after 6, I would come back and work on product. And then after that, obviously, once we got our first businesses installed, you're working on fundraising, and then you're working on hiring, and then you're working on actually shit that you need to do to have a company, legal or HR or job descriptions, all those sorts of things. So I think the job of a founder, the job of CEO, it evolves very much so based on stage, based on what you're working on at the time. I mean, pre-product versus post-product and selling to fundraising to growth. Your role evolves at every stage, and I had no idea about what that was at the time or what that would look like. And so, I think honestly it was much more reactionary. It was like, okay, what do we need to accomplish today? Like, what's the next, like, we don't have money. All right, I should go probably raise some. Like, how do I do that? I need to hire someone. Probably need a job description, or like, we need to figure out how to pay them. We need payroll systems. So a lot of that, is just this evolution of figuring out what you need to do and figuring out how your role evolves and being adaptive. Because I certainly had no idea really what I was doing when I started.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Mark Ackler, and again, he's a mentor of mine as well. Did you lean on folks like Mark and others?
So I think it was critically important for me to have some resources available from like LiveBank as investors or other people to set up some initial services, things that I would consider like not necessarily value add to the business. So things like who's a good lawyer, who's a good accountant, like what's a good HR system. Those are all things that I very much tried to outsource as much as possible. Meaning like, bring on an HR payroll provider, bring on someone that, as a part-time accountant. Like that was not shit that I wanted to spend a lot of my time on. It didn't add value to the company, it didn't create sales, it didn't make the product better. So I tried to push that off as much as possible. And so having a network of people that could provide recommendations and introductions to sort of vet who the best parties are to work with, that was critical to me because I didn't know, and you don't want to end up like Google searching or like posting to Built in Chicago like who should my lawyer be,
Right.
Like those are things that you want referral for. So being involved in the tech community, going to these kinds of events, having mentors in the community was super, super helpful there because I got direct referrals to people that had done it and from people that I trusted. And so it allowed me to make those decisions very quickly and easily and outsource a lot of the things that, again, weren't adding value. In terms of like how to start the company from a product standpoint and like the direction of the business, I mean, Mark, I have an incredible amount of respect for, and I love him to death, and I listen to his opinion very much. But when you're starting a company, there's an extreme shortage of people that are willing to write checks. There's an abundance of people willing to give you opinions, and like the first people are valuable, the second people are not. And so the abundance of opinions. I learned early on, I think, that they were very distracting. And, like, frankly, I think a lot of early stage tech, a lot of founders listen to people too much. I think some of the incubator models that are going on, a lot of the co-working spaces, again, no offense, I'm sorry for this place. I think a lot of it causes some groupthink, and you have all these founders listening to opinions from all these people, from either investors or other founders or people at events, and it's like, okay, well, we should try this thing, we should go in this direction, and ultimately 95% of startups fail. So I mean, who the fuck are you taking advice from? And most second-time founders, like there's not a lot of second-time founders that are, incredibly successful either. So it's like, it's not like there's some wisdom that someone in this crowd has for your business that is going to send you off on a rocket ship. Like if there was that formula, that story, if there was someone that had like that advice or opinion for you, they'd write a fucking book and they'd be rich, and like society wouldn't allow 95% of us to start companies and fail because it's fucking miserable to fail. And so, there's no like common approach, there's no like common characteristics, there's nothing like right or wrong. Like, you have to build your product, your company best, your product best, you're the only one putting your heart, soul, passion into it, you're the only one that's working 100-hour weeks doing this. And so going out and getting opinions from people that listen to you for 30 minutes and have the unbelievable most surface perspective of your business, and maybe this shows some of my ego, I would always listen to those things and take those inputs because there's intelligent people out there that provide good perspective, but I never took any sort of mentors or investors or advisors, like I never took it as direction. It was always an input, a variable, like towards what I determined to be the best path.
Yeah, so I mean, you took the plunge, right? I mean, you left Redbox, landed at Lightbank. Probably not the sort of classic startup scenario. All these folks here are wondering, all right, what should I do?
I have no idea. I don't know. Again, like, you know, anyone that gives you advice and says like, you know, this is what you should do, they're full of shit. Your path, your needs, your life, your experience, like, they're unique to you. So I have no fucking idea. But, you know, and for anyone that works for me, like, this is a terrible idea. So like, don't do this. But you know, I think the one thing I can tell you is that it is not a part-time job. It's not a part-time job. And so, you know, you're going to start a company. Anyone that's in this room that's like, you know, I still work at, you know, my, like, you know, at the accounting firm, and I'm going to do this on the side. Like, you know, starting a company is not a part-time job. It is a decision that you make to work 80, 90 hours for yourself, just so you don't work 40 for someone else. And it is, no matter what you think, like, you know, one of our cultural values that I talk about a lot at Belly is hard work. It's the thing that I respect most in other people. It's the value that I look for most in team and employees. It's the thing that I talk about probably most in terms of value that I respect. People talk a lot about hard work. Like, you know, you never interview someone or meet someone, they're like, yeah, I'm pretty fucking lazy, I'm gonna start a company. Like, everyone tells you they're a super hard worker and they're passionate, but like, people don't really understand what it takes to be successful at starting a company. I mean, it's not like starting something, disrupting something, building a team, building a business, like changing the way, you know, something works. It's not like a work-life balance situation. It's not like, you know, something you do on the side. It's not something that and it's not sexy. You know, I mean, right now, like, I feel like entrepreneurship has become like, you know, the sexy thing. It's super cool and glamorous, and there's like TV shows about it. Like, that's not it. I am not glamorous. My life is not glamorous in any way. Like, it's real fucking hard. And so, if you are going to start, really give a shit about what you're starting. Really fucking care. Be incredibly passionate about it, about either the idea or the team, or like, care a lot, because your life is going to be dedicated to it. Nothing else for a period of time is really going to matter. You're gonna have to make a lot of sacrifices. As successful as we were early on, it's never ever a rocket ship all the time. You are going to hit a lot of valleys, and in those valleys, you know, it takes a hell of a lot of like endurance and passion and resilience to be able to fight through it. And so, care a lot. If you're going to do it, commit. Do it, and after that, you just have to start. You know, there's nothing else I can really tell you, but just start.
Very cool advice. Just one more thing. You mentioned culture, and your level of passion obviously is very palpable. How do you go about creating, building, keeping that kind of culture and work ethic and commitment to what you guys are doing?
Again, I have no fucking idea. Well, so you know, I think one of the things that I think a lot about in terms of like building culture in a company, one of the best like statements I've read about it, I always think back to Reed Hastings, who's the founder CEO of Netflix, and he has this like, you know, 140-page deck on culture and organizations, and it's super smart and articulate, and you know, the guy's very intelligent. And there's one slide in particular that says something to the effect of, culture in an organization is not like what you write on the wall. It's not the couple of values that you put on a door. It's not, you know, like honor, pride, fucking integrity, like all those bullshit that like some people sat in a whiteboard and just looked at a thesaurus and wrote. The statement is like, culture is the values that employees respect in one another, and that the company rewards. And so, true culture in an organization is not what you say it is, as much as you try and preach it. It's not like your value statement. It's not any of those things. I mean, culture in an organization is what, people in the team, what they look at the person next to them and the characteristics, the traits that they respect in one another. And so, ultimately, you can't create or maintain or change culture in an organization. Culture is authentic. It's a living thing. And so, for me, I've just always tried to be as authentic as I can, to be honest about who I am, what I'm good at, and what I care about. Try to put that out there as much as possible. Try and hire people, teams, or promote people or value people that have similar characteristics that we value, and at least in some way hope that other people agree, value those things in one another, and that maintains. Because again, I think authenticity is the only thing that's sustainable.
Very cool. Love it. Why don't we open up to questions?
Yeah, primarily we run fundraise from VCs. So our first round, Lightbank venture firm. We raised convertible note from Lightbank venture firm. We raised some debt from Silicon Valley Bank, which is growth capital loans. And then our Series A was all Andreessen Horowitz, $10 million. And our last round, Series B, was primarily venture firms, Andreessen Horowitz, NEA, DAG Ventures. But we did have some strategics. So Cisco Systems is an investor now. 7-Eleven is an investor now. So we did raise some strategic investors as well, but primarily strategics and VCs. We actually, Lightbank is our only Chicago investor. We've taken a lot of shit for that, but yeah. Are investors pressing us to go to an exit? The answer is no. No. Yeah, well, so our investors, frankly, I think they know better than to press me on, trying to have that conversation. Yeah, maybe, but I mean, they're trying to have that conversation. Like, our investors, frankly, like, we worked with investors that were aligned with our vision. We worked with very large VCs. We worked with, Lightbank even. I mean, the guys that started Lightbank as a venture fund, like, they've taken 3 companies public. So with these guys, like, a $10 million sale or a $100 million sale, it's not really what they're looking for. Like, our board member from Andreessen Horowitz is on the board of Airbnb and Pinterest, and so we're aligned in terms of trying to build and work towards something very big. Not closely at all. I mean, our plans change almost daily. Yeah, I mean, we have roadmaps for sure. I think it's funny because, like we do what we call like product roadmap conversations and these decks about what we're building, and ultimately, like right now, we're still working on building things that were in my first pitch deck. So like the vision from my first pitch deck in August 2011 is still things that we're working to become. And so, it's something that like, fucking infuriates me that we haven't done it all yet. At the same time, it's something that I'm very proud of because we haven't strayed from our vision. We are not, building new features or trying new things all the time at the whim of, a new buzzword or some new tech that launches. And so ultimately, like, we stay very focused, try to stay very focused on what we're trying to accomplish. We know what our end goal is. We know what our mission is. Like, we know the problem that we're trying to solve. So everything we do from a product standpoint, everything we do from a roadmap standpoint is very concentrated towards that vision, towards that goal. Maniacal focus is a word that I try to use quite a bit. It's a word that we get a lot from Chuck Templeton, founder of OpenTable, and Chuck says maniacal focus quite a bit. Matt Maloney at Grubhub says, I don't know, there's something very similar. But we try and stay very focused towards that roadmap. It changes a lot based on what we consider prioritization. So like we have our roadmap of things we want to build. We have our roadmap of what we're going to work towards, like what products we're working on. But our prioritization in terms of when we're going to work on them, that changes often. And that changes with, many different things. As an example, like iOS 8, new software from Apple, like that caused some bugs in our system. So the last 2 weeks, everything's out the window and only working on that. So it changes frequently. I think they're a waste of time. I think you should spend very little time on them. Honestly, they are spend very little time on patents. Realistically, no, it's not Shark Tank. Unless you're pitching a product that's going to go on QVC, unless it's like a physical product of like a cheese shredder that folds in a certain way. I think that's critically important. But if you're talking about like software, if you're talking about like a consumer product or something tech, doesn't matter at all. The only issue that you typically run into, and VCs never ask, I've literally never been asked whether or not we have any patents. We do, but it's because people on my team that care more about those things than me, worked on it. I've never been asked. No one's ever checked. No one's ever, the only thing is just patent trolls, and ultimately, with patent trolls, that's, a fear of a potential lawsuit, but ultimately, you can't run your business out of fear. Almost everything is in some way, shape, or form patented, or so. Realistically, if you're a tech or software business, I would spend very little time on it. Again, 95% of startups fail. That failure rate is almost always because either a founder, CEO gives up, quits, or they run out of money. It's almost always like conflict with team, founder quits, or gives up on the idea, or you run out of money. Very, very rarely do you ever hear of a startup failing that has product market fit, that has a product that people care about, that people are using. Very rarely have you ever heard that, that's a product that everyone loves, but they didn't have the patent for it. It doesn't really happen. Yes and no. I think early on, a big determining factor of the success, I think, of a founder is whether or not you can recruit people to your team when you have very little resources available. And so the ability to find the right people, connect with them, pitch them, and get them to believe enough in you and the concept and the future of the business. Your ability to pitch them, almost like pitching an investor or selling to a client, is I think a critical skill set in recruiting in general. Critical skill set, and so a lot of it early on of people that joined you early, you don't have funding, you don't have clients, you don't have. You're working on a PowerPoint. It's not like you're pitching them on the promise of a salary. Even if you could pay them, it would be fucking pennies. And so you're selling. I sold a lot, I pitched a lot, believe in the future of the business. On some, we did some early contract work. I pay hourly and things where I, racked up credit card bills and racked up, some invoices, but ultimately early on it was mostly about selling. Again, we have a mission, and we want to help businesses create and enhance digital connections with their customers to strengthen customer loyalty. And so, for us, the ability for us to help businesses connect with their customers, the ability for us to give customers one card or app that they can use at all their favorite places, our value prop is significantly better the more places that you can use Belly. And so, obviously, for us, growth is a key consideration. So, we're about 8,000 locations today. We'll be about 10,000 by the end of the year, and we have some aggressive growth plans to grow that number. And then from there, we have our product roadmap, how to continue to iterate on our product, make our product better, improve the product for the merchants that we work with, and make the consumer experience better. But ultimately, for us right now, from a goal standpoint, I think there's not much in terms of a roadblock in front of us except for our ability to execute on our plan. Right? Like we believe we have product market fit. We believe we have the right team to do it. And so ultimately it all comes down to, can we execute on what we know that we're capable of? And so specific goals for us is make sure that our team is aligned towards that mission and accomplish what we set out to accomplish. Hit our goals and execute well.
All right, cool. Why don't we end it right there? All right, man. Let's give it up for Logan.